Good morning, good afternoon or good evening whenever you pick this up. My name's Graham Gordon Thomas, and I want to add a little further to the interests of how the pyramids, the Great Pyramids of Khufu was built, or whoever built it. We don't know for certain who built the pyramids. That's one thing we can say for certain. And it seems to me that academics, archaeologists and all those Egyptologists who are within the academy of the world and within the universities and teaching ancient architecture and whatever, quite frankly don't have a clue how this pyramid was built, how the Great Pyramids were built, because they've never been in the building game. It stands to reason they may have difficulty getting around the idea of how it was built. But they're trapped in a contract system, which means they have to teach what is already in train for the last 100 years or whatever it is. They've been doing this ideological approach towards teaching students how the pyramids were built, because they're fixed in that, because they can't suddenly change their mind, because it would mean that all of the professors involved in Egyptology would be redundant. Now that's their problem, because they are redundant in that they might be the experts on the Egyptology itself, but how it was built, quite frankly, they don't have a clue. I was a mason for a long time. From when I was 15, I worked as a specialist mason in what you call refractory industry, which is building furnaces. And I was involved in some very complex building of big furnace constructions. They were no less complex than it is building a pyramid, and that's all about geometry and angles, and you set things out and you know what you're doing, and then the knowledge passed down in the people who built these things is a continuum from the time they built the pyramids. There's no breakage of knowledge within the masons who built the big furnaces and the big cathedrals, because the constructions techniques are similar. The knowledge has never died. Right back to Sumeria, the development of building techniques and the development of the way things are constructed is a continuous line of knowledge, learning and experience. It's continuous, and it becomes an intrinsic wisdom in how things are done. So in a contemporary situation where they're building skyscrapers, there's a contemporary intrinsic wisdom about how they were done, and they're learning more and more how to build bigger and bigger skyscrapers. So technology and techniques and understanding is being accumulated all through the centuries. So the building itself, or the means of building or the learning about building, has become a continuous learning process, whereas archaeology, when it comes to Egyptology, is seen to be stuck within a one-tone mode, a monotone mode, where it says they were used in things like ramps to build the large pyramid, when it makes no sense whatsoever. And I defy any 10 men to pull up a 2-ton block up a ramp within 2.5 minutes. If they laid the blocks at 2.5 minute intervals to complete the pyramid within the time period they said they did, then I defy anyone to pull up a 2-ton block up a slope, a massive slope, which would have been bigger than the pyramid itself. I want to defy 10 men to pull one block up in 2.5 minutes. I like to see how it's done. It's impossible, physically impossible. You would break your backs, you would run out of labour force. It's obvious Not only that, with the trouble with the ramp explanation, it doesn't take into consideration, I think, all the angle of incidence, which I think is 31 degrees or 37 degrees. I forgot at this instant, but you can look that up. Angle of incidence says you can put a pile of sand up to a certain angle, and then the sand will start running down on itself because of gravity will overcome the friction. Now, when you build a ramp to what's got to go up hundreds of feet, like in a pyramid, it would mean that the width of the bottom of the ramp would be massive, would be big as the pyramid itself. It would be at least 50 degrees to be able to hold all the material. And then what do you hold it with? How would you build it to ensure that it didn't cave in on the people who were using it? The ramp doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and it's so inefficient because all the amount of material you need to build the ramp, the amount of time it would take to build the ramp, and the amount of time it would take to remove the ramp at the same time. At the same time, this is the intrinsically important part. When you built the ramp, that's a large scar right on the face of the pyramid, so when you face the pyramid itself with the final, those pink limestone blocks they use, or whatever they use, then you've got this gap that you have to fill. Then you've got to pull all your... See, when they built the facing, they built the facing from the ground up. It wouldn't make... If you had a ramp, you wouldn't be able to do that. The facing had to be continuous, one course at a time, or something like that, around the pyramid. If you had this massive amount of the build of the ramp itself, the material on the ramp facing on the pyramid, that would be a massive amount of the pyramid. Then you would have to, once the ramp was removed, which would take an awful long time, then you would have to face the pyramid in that gap that was left by the ramp. So the ramp idea, although pushed and even gone on, they're even on TV showing this to the innocent people who don't quite understand construction techniques and the logistics of it, that they use the ramp, when it actually doesn't make any sense to say the people of Egypt were highly brilliant and skilled engineers and they did something so inefficient as using a ramp, when it's obvious that the amount of physical labour used and required to pull a 2.5 ton block up the ramp is quite something. I'd like to see that done. I've moved a lot of material in my life, all different sizes of materials in my life, but I don't imagine how anyone's going to do that, no matter how much you whip your labourers. And the labourers apparently were whipped or weren't slaves. So not only that, in blast furnaces, at the bottom of blast furnaces, and I haven't been in the game for a long time, so the technique may change, they use a massive a half a ton block and ton blocks in the base of the furnace. These blocks are very precisely made, and they have hardly any joint. You can't get a cigarette paper between the joints, and they are laid exactly level and whatever, and two men, using a technique, two men move those blocks into place. Just two men. Now, how that's done, I can keep to myself because that's so fun to keep a bit of mystery, but what it tells you that in Egypt, where they had the shaduf, they understand leverage. And not only that, they had the wheel, so they understand what a wheel could do. If these people are clever enough to build this pyramid and set it all out, they would know how to use wheels and leverage with the shaduf to move large pieces of material, and it's only a matter of engineering the equipment to then pull up the material up the slope. Rather than push it over, you can pull it up on your back. You try that. Anyone who thinks you can put a rope around your back over your shoulder and pull a big rock up a thing and not get a broken back, just never done any work in their life. Your last one go and your back would be crippled for life. So unless you've got an endless disposable labour force that you can kill off at a going rate, continuous rate, then it's not going to last for very long. Your labour force, you're going to be out of it within a short period of time. So we can see they must have used another method, and I've suggested in a previous video, they had logs. They took the large stones from the quarries. They used a ramp and rail system where they rolled the large stones on a rail system. They lowered them onto the rail system, which is a lot of large logs put, and then on the rails, and rails on top of that, you put your stones on that and you roll them along your logs onto your barge, which is also made out of logs. You roll them straight onto there because you've set up your wharf accordingly. You take that up to the place where you want to place them on the pyramid, because there was a canal going to the pyramid. You take them up to there, you fasten your ropes around them, use leverage because you've already set up the system beforehand up in the pyramid where the king's chamber is, and you've got that obviously a means to slide things up, and you've got the ropes behind that, and you can easily use a box or sand or wood or anything. As long as you've got the ropes are strong enough, then you can easily use something on the other side to pull those up. You may have people guiding it from behind, but you would pull it up from the top, because that makes logistical sense, engineering sense and common sense, if you're going to say the Egyptians who built these things were extremely clever, and they must have been absolutely brilliant to put the material and the stones on top of the massive pillars they have. You have to say, well, how did they do that? They must have had some sort of means, mechanical means of moving things upwards that didn't require men, millions of men, pulling their guts out, because it doesn't make sense. You can only injure so many workforce, and before they start going on strike and say we're not doing this, unless it's a total slave system where you can kill off your people that once you've used them up, like it is becoming today. In today's society, we're going back to that system. That's another beside the point. The thing is, academics in the universities around the world who are stuck into contracts teaching the same old are stuck with it. They're very, very clever, and I respect them for their brilliance at being able to read the hieroglyphs and all that and explain the history, but they cannot, and they have not, in any way, shape or form, explain how these pyramids were built, because they're really, quite frankly, when you listen to them, you know they haven't got a clue about how things are built. If you've been in the building game as extensively as I was, from when I was 15 years old, then you learn to understand how things are moved. And you have a connection right back to what goes for thousands of years, because of the knowledge is passed down. It's unbroken. In that respect, you have some insight to how things are done. So it's a time that instead of being so arrogant about what you are, a professor of archaeology and Egyptology, is about time those people stood back and allowed the masons and the engineers the respect they should have from archaeologists, so it's mutual, to come and have a look at this, the problem of how a pyramid was built, with a more intellectual and open-minded approach than there is at the moment, where we keep still seeing programs on TV which is telling basically bullshit to people about East Island, and they're selling things about the pyramids that are patently wrong. It's patently wrong, and it's misleading people who have never been in the building game and don't know how to build, to suggest there was a ramp that built the pyramid. It's actually quite absurd when you think about it for 2 minutes. Why would you do it that way, the hard way, when you could set up leverage and pulleys and do it the easy way? They had the wheel, they had the shaduf. Now, it doesn't take a genius to connect those two things together and say, well, we can move things with this system, with this technology. It takes no leap of great leap of the mind at all to be able to jump to that conclusion. Anyway, I'm Graham Gordon Thomas, suggesting there never was a ramp used to build a pyramid, and suggesting archaeologists are stuck in contracts they can't get out of, and they're afraid of, they think they own the knowledge. No one owns knowledge. Knowledge is free within the human system. Knowledge is random. It is not owned by humanity. Knowledge is a thing, a being within itself, that's a continuum through the ages and through society. Knowledge is separate from humanity. We just share within the knowledge, if you like. An intellectual sharing within the knowledge sphere or the knowledge field. The quantum field that the knowledge becomes then is filtered through to society, and I'd say Egyptologists now are sort of out of date when it comes to understanding how the pyramids were built, no matter how well they understand the rest of the story. Thank you. My name's Graham Gordon Thomas, bringing some insight how the pyramids were not built and how they were probably built.